what's more, we've been celebrating Hanukkah already for hundreds of years by the time this question was asked. The question of the Gemara becomes even stranger when you realize that after the Gemara has discussed many details of the holiday, we've already learned about the basic mitzvah of lighting, the method of lighting, the mahadran and mahadran min mahadran, the debate between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai as to whether we begin with 8 candles and count down to 1 and up, etc., etc. And now we want to know my Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah? So what is this question about? And I want to suggest, just to start us off, that the question isn't what is Hanukkah? We already know what is Hanukkah, but the question really is why. Why is it that we celebrate Hanukkah? What is behind the holiday? What is the animating features below the surface that make Hanukkah what it is? And so to begin answering that question, we're going to focus in on the Torah of 5 of our faculty members tonight. And the first is going to be Rabbanit Devorah Zlochower, who is the Dean of Yeshivat Maharat and has brought so much wisdom, Torah, compassion, and passion to her work. And we're just thrilled to welcome you, Rabbanit Devorah, to start us off. Thank you. We can't hear you yet. Not yet. 1 second, we're having technical difficulties as Rabbanit Devorah gets her sound going.
You are unmuted on our end, Rabbanit Devorah, so maybe take out your headset.
Oh no, what's going on? Yes, you can hear me? Yes, we're good? Okay, wow, that was, okay, so now that I made the first mistake, everyone else is free to absolutely excel. Okay, so good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Rabbi Sara, for your introduction. I actually also wanted to start off with my Hanukkah. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the end of it. And my point here in our learning together is to argue that fundamentally, Hanukkah is a holiday of thanksgiving and praise. In fact, the lighting of the candles, I'm going to argue, is not actually central. What's central is halel v'hoda'ah, the notion of praising God and thanking God for miraculous salvation. And this finds expressions in various parts of the Hanukkah rituals. Number 1, of course, the recitation of the full Hallel. Hanukkah is the only rabbinic holiday in which we actually say Hallel. Number 2, the insertion of the liturgical piece Al Hanisim into the Shmona Esrei and into Birkat Hamazon, specifically into the blessings that talk about Hoda'ah, that talk about Thanksgiving. And finally, I do want to go back and talk about Ner Hanukkah, the Hanukkah lights, as a concrete expression of Thanksgiving as well. So let's begin where Rabbi Sara began, with the famous gemara in Masechet Shabbat that talks about the establishment of the days of Chanukah. This, of course, is the one place where we have the mentioning of the miracle of the cruse of oil, and I want to focus on the last line there. The gemara says, "Naaseh bo nes v'hidliku mimenu shmona yamim." This miracle happened, and the oil lasted for 8 days. L'shana acheret kava'um va'asa'um yamim tovim b'halel v'hoda'ah. So the next year, they established these 8 days as a holiday with Hallel and Hoda'ah, with praise to God and with thanksgiving. And that idea is echoed in the Al Hanisim itself. Here in the Al Hanisim, of course, we only have a mention of the war and the miraculous victory. And here too, after they go into the temple and they light the menorah, we're told v'kavush monach yemei Chanukah elu lehodot ul'hallel l'shimcha hagadol. They established these 8 days as the holiday of Hanukkah. Why? In order to give thanks and to praise your holy name. In both of these sources, we see absolutely no mention of an institution of the lighting of the candles. And therefore, it looks like the central ritual of Hanukkah, in fact, is the Hallel. So I'm going to pause on the Hallel for a moment, and I want to talk for a moment about Hoda'ah, about Thanksgiving. Now, the insertion in the Shemona Esrei and the Birkat HaMazon of Al-Hanisim actually does not appear in the Talmud, but the rabbinic sources do talk about inserting what they call Me'ein HaMe'orah, a mention of the event that we're commemorating in both the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei that we say 3 times a day, and in Birkat HaMazon. There's a discussion in the Gemara about whether one in fact should insert in the Al-Hanisim in benching, but the conclusion is that we do actually tell this little story of the miracle of God saving the few from the hands of the many. And the locus of that story is in the bracha of Modim, right? Bracha of Modim in Shemona Esrei and in the bracha of the land in Birkat HaMazon. So what is that about? So we know that the insertions of into the Shemona Esrei and into the Birkat HaMazon of the biblical holidays actually take place in the bracha that talks about the temple, the rebuilding of Jerusalem, or the bracha in Shemona Esrei that talks about the restoration of the divine service. And that makes a lot of sense because the biblical holidays are, of course, signified by the bringing of a special sacrifice. Chanukah is different. Chanukah, we're not talking about the temple, even though it was during the temple time. We're not talking about bringing any special korbanot. What we're doing here is we're again talking about the miraculous event for which we are thanking God. So while the rabbinic sources, most of the early rabbinic sources generally do not give us this particular language, they indicate that that's where it belongs. And in fact, we do have an early precursor to the Al-Hanisim blessing that comes in Masechet Sofrim that tells us exactly that we thank God for the miracles that were done in the days of Matityahu, should sound familiar, and that it's actually a prayer. God should continue to do miracles with us and to continue to save us. So again, that connection being made there between redemption and salvation, and the notion of the proper response being turning towards God, praising God, acknowledging that this is a miracle, and that becomes really the central role. So let's go back to Hallel for a second. So Rav Soloveitchik, of blessed memory, one of the things that one of his famous shiurim discusses the 2 different models of Hallel that we have. One of them, and they appear in 2 different gemarot, I just want to mention this very briefly. One of them is the Hallel that we say on the biblical holidays, on Shavuot, on Sukkot, and the beginning of Pesach. And that Hallel is really connected again to the temple. It is the Hallel that was recited when the extra sacrifices, the Musaf, were being brought. There's a second model of Hallel, which is mentioned in the Gemara in Pesachim 117a. And the Gemara there discusses Hallel as a spontaneous outpouring of thanks to God for the doing of a miracle. The Gemara there discusses various possibilities as to what the origin story of that Hallel is. Did the Jewish people say it when they crossed the Yam Suf? Did they say it during the miraculous victory? Well, I have to mention Devorah, under Devorah. That's one of the ones that I remember. So we have 2 very different models here. And what I'd like to say is that Chanukah seems to fit into the model, obviously, of the Hallel that's said as a response. But what's different is it institutionalizes it, right? We now take that Hallel, and instead of it being spontaneous, we actually make it a piece of liturgy. And by making it a piece of liturgy, we make it part of what we do every single year to not just remember the miracle that happened, but to remind ourselves that God saved us and that God continues to save us. So my final message, I think the take home from all of this is something I try to think about every day. In Shemona Esrei, when we say the bracha of Modim, when we say the bracha of gratitude and thanksgiving, and we thank God for your miracles that are with us every day, that sometimes we need a reminder. We need a little reminder to tell us, yeah, miracles happen. And our life is full of miracles. There are these big miracles like the miracle of Chanukah. That's an occasion to turn to God and to praise God and to thank God. And in fact, this is a message we should take with us every single day. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rabbanit Devorah. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box. We have the amazing Jen, who is monitoring the questions, and we hope to have some time at the end to be able to have some time to answer those questions. And now we're on to Rabbi Adam Mintz. Adam Mintz is a Gemara Rebbe at Yeshivat Maharat, teaches a enticing and exciting shiur for our students, and is going to teach us about Chanukah candles and Shalom Bayit from Shabbat 23b. Rabbi Mintz, welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Sara. It's a pleasure to participate tonight. And I'd like to share with everybody a section of the Gemara and study it the way we study every day, every week in Maharat. Study the Gemara, enter the world of the rabbis, see how the rabbis relate to us and how we can relate to the rabbis. Masechet Shabbat, Daf Chav Gimel Amud Bet. Amar Rabba, Pshitali, it's obvious to me. Ner Beito v'ner Chanukah, Ner Beito Adif.
Rabbi Mintz, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you just fix your camera a little bit so we can see you a little bit better?
Sorry, I can.
There we go. Thank you.
You like that better? Okay. Sorry, have to balance my Gemara and my camera. I apologize. Ner Beito v'ner Chanukah, Ner Beito Adif, Mishum Shalom Bayit. If you only have enough money to purchase Shabbos candles or Hanukkah candles, the money should be spent to purchase Shabbos candles. Now, something you have to understand about Shabbos candles, and that is in the old days, before there was electricity, Shabbos candles not only performed the tradition of Shabbos candles, but also actually allowed there to be light in the house. If there's no light in the house, people argue with one another. If you can't find your spoon for your chicken soup, people get frustrated. For Shalom Bayis, you need to have light. You only have enough money for Shabbos candles or Hanukkah candles, you should spend the money for Shabbos candles. Ner Beito v'Kiddush Hayo. What about if you only have enough money either for Shabbos candles or for wine for Kiddush? Ner Beito Adif. Again, you should spend money for Shabbos candles, not Kiddush, because Mishum Shalom Bayit, because of the importance of Shalom Bayit. By Rava. Rava asks the following question. Ner Chanukah v'Kiddush Hayom Mahu. What about if you only have enough money either for Hanukkah candles or for wine for Kiddush? Meaning, you bought your Shabbos candles. You have just enough money left either for Hanukkah candles or for wine for Kiddush. Which should you prefer? And the Gemara asks the question. Mahu, what's the answer? Kiddush Hayom Adif Tadir. Maybe you should spend money on wine for Kiddush because Kiddush happens more frequently than Hanukkah candles. And we have a rule that frequency, you try to do things that happen more often. O Dilma ner Chanukah Adif Mishum Pirsumei Nisa. Or maybe you should spend money on Hanukkah candles because of the importance of publicizing the miracle of Hanukkah. Batar Dibai Hadar Pashta. After they asked the question, they answered it. Ner Chanukah Adif. The Hanukkah candles are more important. Mishum Pirsumei Nisa. Because of the importance of publicizing the miracle. So what we have here is a very interesting Gemara, because you always love Gemaras that present competing values. We have basically put aside for a minute Kiddush, which is frequency. You have competing values. The value of Hanukkah candles is the value of Pirsumei Nisa. of publicizing the miracle, of telling everybody about Chanukah, about the victory of Chanukah. And you have Shabbos candles. And that is about Shalom Bayis, about people getting along. Says the Gemara that if you only have enough money and you can only fulfill one, do you publicize the miracle or do you emphasize Shalom Bayis? So you might have thought that Chanukah should win. Chanukah happens once a year, right? Or 1 week a year. You'll have Shabbos candles the rest of the year. No, says the Gemara. The value of Shalom Bayis wins out over everything. And if even one night of Chanukah, Friday night of Chanukah, you're not going to have Chanukah candles because you have to spend your money on Shabbos candles, Shalom Bayit wins. The importance of having peace at home. Peace at home means that everybody should get along and it should be easy for people to enjoy their Shabbat. That's an amazing principle in the Gemara. But as we do every day when we study Gemara, we don't stop just with the rabbis. Because Tosfot here actually asks a question that is relevant to us this year. Because this year, Shabbat Chanukah is also Shabbat Rosh Chodesh. And we know that when a special day falls out on Shabbat, the Haftorah that we read is always the Haftorah of that special day. So therefore, the Shabbat Rosh Chodesh, we read the Haftorah for Rosh Chodesh. On the Shabbatot around Purim and around Pesach, we read the Haftorah for Purim and Pesach, or for those Shabbatot, Shkalim, Zachar, Para HaChodesh, Shabbat Zachar, Shabbat HaGadol. So the question is like this, asks Tosfot. Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah. That's a hard one, because there are two special elements of that Shabbat. One is Rosh Chodesh, and one is Chanukah. Which Haftorah do you read? You can't read both. That's unfair to everybody to read two Haftorahs. You can only read one Haftorah. Of those two Haftorahs, which Haftorah do you read? Asks Tosfot, he said, that's exactly what the Gemara says. Should we read the Haftorah of Rosh Chodesh? Because Rosh Chodesh is Tadir. Rosh Chodesh is more frequent than Chanukah. Rosh Chodesh falls out every single month. And therefore, the idea of frequency is important, and frequency should win out. We should read that Haftorah. Or do we read the Haftorah of Chanukah? Because by reading the Haftorah of Chanukah from the book of Zechariah, we actually will be publicizing the miracle of Chanukah, will be fulfilling the aspect of Pirsumei Nisa. And Tosfot says, based on our Gemara had the tension between Ner Chanukah and Kiddush. You only had enough money either for Chanukah candles or Kiddush. Chanukah candles won out because Pirsumei Nisa beats out the idea of Tadir frequency. So too, Tosfot says that on Shabbos Chanukah, which is Rosh Chodesh, you read the Haftorah of Chanukah because the aspect of Pirsumei Nisa is more important than the aspect of frequency. And here you have a wonderful application where you have Tosfot taking a principle in the Gemara resolving a tension between the values of Pirsumei Nisa and Tadir and frequency in favor of Pirsumei Nisa. And Tosfot applies it to a ritual situation of choosing which Haftorah that you read. What an amazing thing, because this Tosfot is as relevant in 2019 when we have this very question on this Shabbos as it was in the 12th century when Tosfot wrote this Tosfot. And this Tosfot is based on a discussion in the Gemara that happened 800-900 years earlier than Tosfot wrote his Tosfot. What a wonderful journey through the lives of the rabbis and through the lives of the Gemara and the practice of today. Thank you so much, and a happy Hanukkah to everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi Mintz. Thank you so much. Again, please record questions in the chat box, and we're now Excited to introduce Rabbi Wendy Amsellem. Wendy has been a long-time faculty at Maharat. I also mentioned runs our new Beit Midrash program, which is a one-year program for students who want to spend a year learning a little bit, hopefully with an eye towards entering the four-year program, the Smicha track, but it's just a one-year standalone program. We have an online option for it, and if you want to learn more about that, then please be in touch. Rabbi Wendy is going to teach us about the Pagan priest, Crossdressing, Betrayal, and a little brother. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, can you guys hear me? Does it sound good? All right, amazing. It's so wonderful to learn with everybody, especially in anticipation of Chanukah. And as Rabbi Sara said, if anybody has any interest or questions about the Beit Midrash program, please, you can send us a question on the Zoom group chat, or you can find me afterwards. But we will get started. Basically, Chanukah, as we know, is largely about a celebration of the rededication of the Beit HaMikdash following the desecration by the Greeks. But the Talmud actually records another story, which is not quite about the desecration of the Beit HaMikdash that occurs kind of within that time period, but about some other kind of goings-on that are interesting and that I thought could serve as a kind of interesting counterpoint to the Chanukah story. So the text that we're going to look at is from the Talmud Bavli. It's Masechet Menachot. It is page 109b. It is, Jen, how can people find it if they want it?
Oh, here's the link.
Oh, great. Yes, there's a link. If people want to click on it, please do, and you can follow along. Okay, the Gemara begins by saying, Ditanya, right? We start off by citing a Breita, citing a text from the Tannaitic period. We're told, Ota Shana Shemed Shimon HaTzadik, in the year that Shimon HaTzadik was a Kohen Gadol, was a high priest during the Second Temple. In the year that he died, it's actually a whole discussion about how he knew he was going to die. But as he was dying, B'sha'at Pitirato, Amar Lehem, he said to the other priests who were assembled around him, he said, Chonyo b'ni yishamesh tachtai, my son Chonyo will take over after me as the high priest. Nitkana bo Shimi achiv, but Chonyo's brother Shimi was actually very jealous when he heard that Chonyo was going to become the high priest. Shehaya gadol mimenu shtei shanim umechze, because Shimi was actually the older brother. He was 2.5 years older than Chonyo. I actually always love the fact that we're told that he was 2.5 years older, right? Because only siblings are aware of like half years in that way. So Shimi was a full 2.5 years older than Chonyo, and he did not understand why his younger brother was going to get to be the high priest instead of him. So he decides to try to maneuver around this. Marlo, so Chonyo, the younger brother, is told by his older brother Shimi, Bo ve'elamdacha seder avodah, come and I will teach you the order of the service. I will teach you what you need to know in order to be the high priest. He'll be show ba'unkali. So then Shimi dresses his younger brother Chonyo up in this women's kind of underdress, v'chigro b'tziltzul, and he girds him with a women's girdle. He'amido etzel hamizbeach. And now that Chonyo is dressed up in women's clothing, he stands Chonyo up next to the altar, and then he turns to the other priests, and he says to them, Ru'u ma nadar ze v'kiyim lahuvato. Look what my brother vowed to his beloved. He promised his lover, Oto hayom she'ishtamesh b'kuna gdola, on the day that I become the high priest, Elbosh be'unkali shalichi, I will wear your underdress, v'achgor b'tziltzul shalichi, and I will wear your girdle. The other priests are very horrified at what they see as a desecration of the temple service, right? Instead of wearing the very sacred high priest's garments, instead this young man is now dressed in women's clothing, standing there at the altar. Vikshu echav kohanim lahargo. So the other priests now all want to kill Chonyo for what they see as a desecration of the temple service. Chonyo has no idea why they want to kill him, right? He's just following his older brother's advice. So he runs away from them, so that way they will not be able to kill him. Ratzu acharav, they chase after him. He runs all the way to Alexandria in Egypt. Ubanasha mizbeach, and when he gets to Alexandria in Egypt, he builds an altar there. Ve'ela alav l'shum avodat kochavim, and he becomes an idolatrous priest. He becomes a priest who offers sacrifices to idolatry. When the sages heard this story, they said the following thing: if Shimi, who never even actually acquired a position of power, if power kind of corrupted him and caused him to do such bad things to his brother, how much more so do people who are actually in power, should they worry that power will somehow get to their heads and corrupt them? Divrei Rabbi Meir. So this is the version of the story according to Rabbi Meir. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda now turns to Rabbi Meir and he says, Lo kacha maseh. He says, no, you have the story wrong. That is not the way that it happened. Let me tell you what happened. Ella lo kibel alav chonyo. So it is true that when Shimon HaTzadik was dying, he did tell all of the assembled people that his younger son Chonyo would take over after him. But lo kibel alav chonyo. Chonyo refused to accept the position of high priest. Shehaya Shimi achiv gadol mimenu shtei shanim u'mechza, because his older brother Shimi was 2.5 years older, right? And since he was 2.5 years older, the younger brother Chonyo felt that his older brother really deserved the position of Kohen Gadol, of high priest, and instead ceded the position to his older brother, which is of course an interesting moment, right? It's not clear that once Shimon HaTzadik chooses Chonyo, it's up that Chonyo has the ability to kind of give it away, but all the same he does. He gives it away to his older brother Shimi, but then we're told the afal pichein nitkana bo Chonyo b'shimi achiv. Even though Chonyo gave the high priesthood away to his older brother, as soon as he did, he kind of was really jealous. It was hard for him to actually turn the position over. And so in this version now, in Rabbi Yehuda's version of the story, Chonyo, the younger brother, says to Shimi, his older brother, come and I will teach you how to be the high priest. I know how to do it because, as you know, our father chose me. So let me tell you what you need to do. And now Chonyo, the younger brother, dresses Shimi, the older brother, up in a women's underdress, and girds him in a woman's girdle, and he stands his older brother Shimi next to the altar. And now Chonyo, who's trying to undermine his older brother's priesthood, turns to the other priests and says to them, look at what my older brother Shimi vowed to his beloved. He said, he said, on the day that I become the high priest, I will wear your underdress and gird myself with your girdle. So now in this version of the story, the priests are again very angry at the thought that a high priest would neglect to wear the sacred garments and instead is wearing women's garments. And so now in this version, though, the Kohanim want to kill Shimi because he's the one wearing the women's clothing. But Shimi, instead of running away, Shimi, we're told, Sach lahem kol hameorah. Shimi tells them exactly what happens. He says, well, don't get mad at me. I'm just doing what Chonyo told me to do. He told me to wear these things. He said this is what a person does as high priest. So once the Kohanim hear that this was all Chonyo's plot, Bikshu laharog et Chonyo, now they again want to kill Chonyo. Ratz mipnehem, Chonyo runs away from them. Ratzu acharav, they chase after him. Ratz lebeit hamalach, Chonyo tries to hide out in the king's palace. Ratzu acharav, they continue to chase him over there. Kol haro'el to'omer zehu zehu. Every person who saw him running said, there he is, there he is. And so nowhere in Israel was safe for him. Halach la'Alexandria shel Mitzrayim. Chonyo runs off to Alexandria, Egypt. V'bana sham mizbeach, and he built an altar there. V'he'ela sham l'shem shamayim. But now in this version of the story, in Rabbi Yehuda's version, Chonyo again runs away. He again winds up in Alexandria. He again builds an altar there, but instead of sacrificing to idolatry, he sacrifices to God. And this is a fulfillment of the pasuk from Yeshayahu, Bayom hahu yeh mizbeach laHashem betoch eretz Mitzrayim, u'matzeva etzel gvula laHashem. There's a verse in Isaiah that says that on that day there'll be an altar for God in the midst of the land of Egypt and a monument at the border for God. כששמעו חכמים בדבר, אמרו, ומה זה שברח ממנו ככה מבקש לרדה על אחת כמה וכמה. If Chonyo, who tried actually to not take on the position of power, he gave it to his brother instead of taking it on himself, if even though he gave it away, he was still corrupted by power so much, how much more so is a person who is actually kind of seeking the power for themselves, how much more so are they liable to be corrupted? So I guess we only have about a minute left, but I think there are a couple of things that are interesting to think about with the story. I mean, first of all, the kind of gender aspect of it is really interesting, right? The fact that there's so much of a focus on the Kohen Gadol's sacred garments in general, and that the son of the high priest could be misled into thinking that women's garments were priestly garments is kind of interesting. And I think it kind of speaks to sort of the sort of level of decoration and beauty of the priestly garments, that it was maybe possible to confuse them. But I think it's also interesting to think about why it is that in Rabbi Meir's version of the story, Chonyo becomes a pagan priest, and in Rabbi Yehuda's version of the story, Chonyo, even though he is building an altar in Egypt, he's still sacrificing to God. And I think one of the main differences between the two versions of the story is that in the first version of the story, Chonyo is just following his brother Shimi's advice. He has no idea why the other priests want to kill him. And because he doesn't have any understanding of the situation, when he runs off, he basically leaves behind everything and he becomes a pagan. In the second version of the story, where Chonyo's been the one who's been undermining his brother Shimi, Chonyo knows exactly why the priests are chasing him down. He knows that he's done something wrong. And I think because he knows that he's done something wrong, even though he's in exile in Alexandria, because he has an understanding of how he got to be there, he kind of is able to sort of, in a partial way, find a way back, and he's able to be a priest who sacrifices to God. And I think that maybe one of the messages of the story for us is that even in situations that are not ideal, kind of having knowledge and having an understanding of how one got to the place makes it kind of easier to find your way back. And certainly in a season when we think about rededication, I would urge all of us to rededicate ourselves to greater learning and greater knowledge, such that we will always be able to find our way back. And I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Wendy. So for those who weren't signed on at the beginning, I want to once again welcome everybody to our first ever live webinar on Chanukah. And this is part of our end of the year Revava campaign, which features and highlights our amazing faculty. And we're just so thrilled to learn with you. We're also, it's part of our campaign where we're raising $400,000 that goes towards our operating expenses, towards our 3 programs, our advanced Kola program, our core speaker program, and our 1-year baby drush program. If you want to learn anything more about those programs, please be in touch with us. The info is in the chat boxes, and please donate and help us reach our goal. We're about 60% of the way there and would love all your support. And with that, I want to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Dr. Erin Leib Smokler, who is our Chassidic Rabbi on staff, and we're so thrilled to welcome you so that you can give us some Chassidic insights into Chanukah. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Great. Okay, so Rabba, Wendy, and I did not coordinate, but I'm certainly glad for that introduction, because as we'll see, we too will be talking about some of the complexities of Chanukah. So I'm going to be speaking with you tonight about a small portion from the Kedushas Levi, who's the Berdichever, or Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, who lived from 1740 to 1810, and his book is called the Kedushas Levi. So he's interested in one of the brachot that we use during candlelighting of She'asa Nisim Avotenu Bayamim Hahem Bazman Hazeh, which I think ordinarily is understood as, we thank you, God, who made miracles for our ancestors then during this season. Meaning, roughly at the end of December, a long, long time ago, some pretty great things happened to the Jewish people. Something along those lines. But needless to say, the Berdichever does not read it that way. And instead, he says the following. And I did include a link in the chat box if anybody wants to follow along in Sefaria. He says, "Benusach habracha omrim she'asa nisim avotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. Ki chol hanisim hayu lemala mehazman. Kimo nisei Mitzrayim v'yam suf v'yarden. V'chol hanisim hayu lemala mehateva." He says all the other miracles, the great miracles, essentially the biblical miracles, are characterized by their supernaturalness and the way in which they are lemala mehazman, above time, outside of the frames that we ordinarily think of, outside of the ways that we ordinarily are involved in the world. These are indications of divine intervention and ways in which God actually turned against or intervened rather inside of natural time. took us out of natural time, that is. And he points to Mitzrayim, like the splitting of the Red Sea, and or maybe also the makot, or the plagues. Those two are indications or examples of things that were outside of nature and outside of time. He says, Masha'ein ken nes Chanukah v'Purim. But the rabbinic miracles, and here he puts together Chanukah and Purim, hayu b'toch hateva. They are actually characterized by their this worldliness, or their this natural time. Meaning, they actually took place in the world as we know it. A pretty complicated world, a world in which miracles aren't always so obvious, a world in which stuff happens. And so to Rabbi Wendy's point, the Chanukah story, much as we love to tell lovely tales about it, was actually not such a big miracle from his standpoint, in the sense that it didn't take place outside of natural time. It didn't violate the rules of nature. Perhaps it was even missable, whether it's because the cruse of oil was so very small, or because the story itself is followed by a great deal of, shall we say, complexity, corruption. The rededicated temple wasn't perfect, or the internecine Jewish battles. The story of Hanukkah is actually just not the one they teach you in day school. There's a whole lot more to it. And the Kedushas Levi actually wants to raise that up and point to the way in which miracles might happen actually in precisely those kinds of spaces and times, the kinds that we actually might be familiar with. This world, this complex world, this dark world, this world that doesn't announce miracles so very clearly. He goes on to say, right? These are sort of ways of talking about, again, the kind of this worldliness. There was war, there was grit, there was corruption, there was all kinds of stuff that took place there, and similarly in Purim. Lachen mevarchim, he says, b'Chanukah she'asa nisim v'chulei bazman hazeh. Rotzeh lomar b'toch hazman. So coming back to that opening bracha, she'asa nisim la'avotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. Not that God did miracles for our ancestors back then in Kislev or December. No, God did miracles back then in this quality of time, in this kind of world, in this kind of place. So lest we think that there was a different universe that happened back then where God intervened and did big things. No. Understand that the Hanukkah story is actually a story for our times. It's a story of modern times. It's a story about the world, again, as we know it, with all of its complexities, with all the ways in which God sometimes seems like God is behind a veil. And he says, Shehu olam hazeh, b'toch hateva asa nisim, she'akol hayam ito yitbarach. Right? That this is actually, again, this world, inside time, even in those kinds of spaces, God makes some small miracles too. And he says, V'lachen nikra Chanukah, she'rabotenu zichronam libracha amru Moshe nitnabeh b'zeh, v'chol hanevi'im b'ko. There's a midrashic notion that plays out in lots of different places. This one is from Sifri, that most of the Nevi'im, most of the prophets use the word ko to describe their relationship with the God, or their prophecies happened in ko, meaning this is what God said. I'll explain in a second, as opposed to Moshe, who was able to point to God and say zeh. You can think of zeh eli va'anvehu. I understand it's not only Moshe there, but the notion, the possibility that a prophet might be able to point with absolute certainty to God and say, this is what God said, this is what God did, I can point to it, I can see it. In contrast to the Nevi'im, who use the language of ko. Maybe this is what God said, that this is how the Kedushas Levi is understanding it. Through, maybe this is how it happened. I think this is what God is saying. I think this is how I ought to understand this. Ko, that's in distinction from Moshe's zeh. Again, ambiguity versus clarity. And he says, Ki b'chinat ko nikra mashahu ba'olam hazeh. That's what characterizes this world, is the ko kind of consciousness. Masha'ein ken Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom hayad davuk tamid lemala mizman nikra zeh. But Moshe, who was able to be in contact with that which is outside of time, or that which is outside of the natural world, Moshe was able to experience the world of zeh. But Moshe.
Sorry.
Okay. V'lachen nikra Chanukah, rotzeh lomar Chanukah. And here he does a beautiful read of the name of Hanukkah. He says, what is Hanukkah about? Hanukkah is about the ability, Chanukah, the ability to dwell within the consciousness of Ka or Ko? Can we learn how to inhabit this space, this ambiguous space, the space in which God is not so obviously present, but where we actually need to look a little harder? And he says, "B'bchinat ko haya chanitam tahainu menuchatam." And I would argue that it's not only a question of the nature of the Hanukkah miracle, but it's an invitation for us to understand this time period, not only as a question of can we dwell in this space, but can we do so with menucha? Can we find a way to do so with peace? Can you rest in this space of uncertainty? Can you learn to live there and still see God there? Shehaya hanes b'toch hateva. Because Hanukkah is this time where we clue in, where we pay extra attention, where we see within a tiny cruse of oil, which isn't a huge miracle in and of itself, but we choose to amplify that and see within it the possibility of grandeur. And he says that's what Hanukkah is. Hanukkah isn't about zeh, and it's not about pointing to grand things, and it's not about absolute clarity. It's actually the choice to live in the darkness, right? The darkness of this time of year, but the darkness of this time itself. And here he's not talking about 2019. He's talking about the nature of natural time. The space that we live in is one that is characterized by ambiguity and uncertainty. And Chanukah, the question of Hanukkah is, can you learn to dwell there and to find miracle there? So I leave you with that and a blessing that we should all be able to find not only the ability to dwell, but to do so and to find menucha, dafka, in this consciousness of real time where there is complexity, ambiguity, and uncertainty. So, Chag Sameach.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So thrilled to welcome in so many ways my partner in crime, Rabbi Jeff Fox, who is our Rosh HaYeshiva, who has been with me on this project almost from the beginning, as has Rabbi Erin, Leib Smokler, and some others. And Rabbi Fox, Rabbi Jeff, is going to teach us about when Athens and Jerusalem first met, the true light of Hanukkah. Rabbi Jeff, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, hear me okay? Alrighty, it's great to see everybody here. As we begin learning some of these texts, we'll see that there will be some echoes of the ambiguity of Rabbi Smokler, as well as a different angle, perhaps, of Shimon HaTzadik. So perhaps we'll come a little bit together with this final piece. We're beginning to read the Parshiot of Yosef, and the Parshiot of Yosef are always read at this time of year. These three Parshiot, Vayeshev, Vayigash, and Miketz, are always the Parshiot that are read around the holiday of Chanukah. And I've noticed a couple of years ago, and it's sort of obvious, but when you hear it, it may be shocking, there's one of the most important biblical characters is absent from the story of Yosef. Not somebody who passed away, but somebody who shows up later on in the book of Shemot, and that's, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God is absent. All of a sudden, we no longer hear Vayomer Hashem El Yosef. God never speaks to Joseph, though Joseph speaks about God. And so I want to offer that perhaps a way to understand the absence of God from the Joseph narratives and the connection to Hanukkah can be seen through the lens of this fascinating story about Shimon HaTzadik. I think the source sheet is in the text, in the chat room, and it's a story from a gemara in Masechet Yoma Daf Samach Tet U'Men Aleph that tells the story of when Alexander Macedon came to Jersualem. And it tells the story of another holiday, probably a holiday that none of us have ever observed. It's a holiday known as Yom Har Grizim, the Har Grizim holiday. It's a holiday from Megillat Tanit. It's not really observed any longer. It takes place, according to the Gemara, on the 25th of the month of Tevet. And it's just what the Gemara describes is that the Kutim, or the Samaritans, were trying to convince Alexander to come and destroy or plow under the Beit HaMikdash. And in fact, they convinced Alexander to come. And Alexander is on his way to destroy Jerusalem, to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. And Shimon HaTzadik, the Kohen HaGadol, discovers, much to his dismay, that Alexander is on his way to destroy Jerusalem. And Shimon HaTzadik puts on his Bigdei Kahuna, not women's garments, but he puts on the 8 holy vestments of the Kohen HaGadol, and he leaves the city of Jerusalem, which, by the way, the Kohen HaGadol is not allowed to leave the confines of the Beit HaMikdash. And he leaves the city to go greet Alexander and the Samaritans, who are literally on the way to destroy the Jewish people. And when they meet, at dawn, when they meet, the Kutim turn to Alexander and they say, here are the Jews. These are the people who are rebelling against you. These are the people you're supposed to destroy. And Alexander does something amazing. Alexander gets off his horse and he bows to Shimon HaTzadik. The Kutim, the Samaritan, are shocked. What are you doing, Alexander? You're supposed to kill these people. Why are you bowing? And Alexander tells the Kutim, tells the Samaritans, you know what? Every time I go into battle, I see a vision of Shimon HaTzadik in his high priestly garments, and he's what lets me win. He's what let me conquer the whole world, the whole Greek Empire. And at that point, Alexander says to the Jews, says to Shimon HaTzadik, you can take the Samaritans, and they go and plow under the Samaritan temple on Har Grizim, and that's what creates the holiday known as Yom Har Grizim. And at that moment, it was the first time in which Athens, here in the guise of, or in the model of Alexander, literally came to Jerusalem, come to destroy Jerusalem, came to be in conflict with Jerusalem. And there was another conflict later on with the Maccabim. There was another conflict between Athens and Jerusalem. And in some ways, that conflict is the conflict between philosophy and science, religion and reason. What do we do with that conflict that runs throughout all of human history, of all of human thought? And to take it even one step forward, the second text on your source sheet is a fascinating gemara, or a fascinating midrash actually, that claims that the point in time in which Alexander came to Jerusalem changed Jewish history forever. And it made a fundamental shift in the way in which we, the Jewish people, relate to God. That until Alexander came to Jerusalem, there was the possibility of nevuah, of prophecy. But the moment in which Alexander came to Jersualem was the moment of the switch from the world of nevuah to the world of, in the words of the midrash, hat oznecha u'shema divrei chachamim. Bend your ear, or incline your ear, and listen to the words of the chachamim, meaning listen to the rabbis. That was the moment of Alexander's coming to Jerusalem, where now there's no longer the clarity of nevuah, but now we have the ambiguity or the uncertainty of living in a rabbinic universe, living in a world no longer of nevuah, but a world of midrash, where we do our best through the study of Torah to somehow figure out what it is that God wants from us. And in some way, therefore, we're living in a world today, just like the rabbis, in a world of Yosef, not in the world of Avraham and Sara, because Yosef didn't have direct access. Yosef could interpret dreams and could talk about God. God was on Yosef's lips, but God did not speak directly. We do our best to try to interpret, to understand, to seek, to find, even in a world that's ambiguous, in a world that's dark. We do our best to find what it is that God wants from each of us. And in fact, the Midrash and other places says that as long as Shimon HaTzadik was the high priest, that in fact, one of the candles in the menorah never went out for 40 years. So maybe the real miracle of the light of Hanukkah is not that small cruse of oil that we began with, not the My Hanukkah oil that lasted for 8 days, but the oil of Shimon HaTzadik that lasted for 40 years, which is ultimately the oil of the Jewish people that were able to beat Alexander, to best the Greeks that came to Jerusalem, and even in the face of Alexander, to nonetheless seek out the words of Hashem. I'm sure every year we seek out the new Maccabees song for Hanukkah. Many years ago, I'm sure we all remember, I Flip My Latkes in the Air. Right? The song that gets stuck in your head is like an earworm. That song is an extraordinary, that whole genre of music teaches us something very important. Because what it reminds me every year when these crazy Maccabees and 613 songs come out is that we think we won the war. We think we bested Greece. But in fact, what we did is we took the best that Greece had to offer. We took the reason, the philosophy of Alexander, the world of the rabbis, imbibed, took in what Alexander had to offer. Nevuah ended. Now we access God through reason, through thinking, through seeking, through midrash, through text, not through nevuah. So we took the best that the world had to offer, and all those stupid songs, the best the world has to offer, and we make it our own. And our kids love it, and they do all the stupid dances, and it's so much fun. In fact, they just came from the 4th grade Navi play at SAR, and in this ridiculous play. The kids are putting on a review of all of Chumash in 1 hour, and they're up there with their cell phones, and Moshe Rabbeinu is ordering an Uber to get out of Mitzrayim. And it's so sweet because the kids just love Torah, and the idea that Moshe was ordering an Uber was a beautiful moment on stage. It was such joy because they knew it was silly, and all the parents were shepping such nachas. And the moment where the new Maccabee song comes out is the moment where we take the best that Athens has to offer, we bring it into Jerusalem, we bring it into our Masorah, and we do each of us in our own way to seek out what ultimately that God wants from us. Maybe not to flip our latkes, but maybe to seek out, even in this time of darkness, just like Yosef HaTzadik, when he sat in jail, he was seeking out God. Each of us at this time of year when it's getting very dark outside and there are these snow squalls coming, and no one really knows what to do with them as the warnings came onto our phones. And then we get to light some small candles. And that small light perhaps represents, in this understanding, the light of Torah, which is what ultimately the guiding light of Yeshivat Maharat, the Torah that brings us closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu, that allows us to live in the world of ambiguity, in the world that's not so clear, and ultimately find the will of Hashem. Chag Chanukah Sameach, everybody.
Chanukah Sameach. Thank you. My Chanukah. I think we had a really fabulous review of why do we celebrate Hanukkah, and I think one of the many animating messages that I'm pulling out for us tonight is that we need more light. We need more light in this world that is dark, that is confusing, that is uncertain. And I am so thrilled that this faculty, who I'm privileged to work with every day, brings so much light and Torah into our Beit Midrash, and that our students are doing their work by pushing light out into the world. Just thinking about almost a week ago, students went to Jersey City to put up cards that many of the members of my community signed, just offering words of condolence and thoughts for those who lost their lives, the 4 who lost their lives last week at Jersey City. And this is a scary time, and we need courageous leaders, and so proud that my students are going out and are on the front lines of bringing more Torah, more compassion, and more love and light out into the world. And I thank you for being part of it, for learning with us and listening and engaging with us on social media and watching all of the crazy videos that we're putting out in the world. And I want to ask to please support the work, to donate towards our end of the year Rabba campaign. As I said earlier, we're just over 60% of the way there, and we want to get to 100% by the middle of January. That's when the campaign ends. So spread the word and help us spread our light by donating, and you can do so in honor of one of these amazing faculty members who I am so personally grateful for every day. So once again, thank you to Rabbanit Devorah Zlochower, to Rabbi Adam Mintz, to Rabbi Wendy Amsellem, to Rabbi Dr. Erin Smokler, and to Rabbi Jeff Fox for lighting the torch and sharing your wisdom. And thank you to Jen Begg, who is our director of community engagement, who really gets a lot of credit for this idea and this platform, and to our student Liz Shane, who's helping us with tech, and all of you for learning with us. Jen, I'm turning to you for the final words.
So thank you all of you for joining us this evening. I know many of you jumped on in the middle or near the end. Just know that we'll be sharing out the recording tomorrow, and you can go ahead and watch the full video on Facebook. It's already there. You can follow us on Facebook or on Instagram at We Are Maharat, and we look forward to getting to know you. If you are interested in bringing a Maharat scholar, a student, an alumna, a faculty member to your community, I welcome you to reach out to me. My email will be in the chat box momentarily, and it's also available on the website. And we just want to wish you all a Chag Chanukah Sameach, and we look forward to continuing to get to know you and learn with you moving forward.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night.